Hey, second graders. So, we are going to be starting a brand new social studies unit today. But before I announce what that will be, let's think back to some of our previous units that we've studied so far this year in second grade. So, we have been learning all about New York City since September. In September, we started off by learning about present day New York City. At first, we talked about the 5 boroughs that make up New York City. And we did a little bit of geography map work. Can you remember the 5 boroughs? Say them. Press pause. All right, did you say Queens, the Bronx, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and Manhattan? If so, you're right. And we talked all about special landmarks that can be found in each of those boroughs, and we did a special research project. And then we traveled back in time to the 1500s to learn about the Lenape. The last couple of months, we've been learning all about what life was like for that Native American tribe. And in the 1600s, there were some European explorers that were really curious to find a way to get to Asia. And today, we are going to learn about what happened when some of those explorers ended up in New York. And of course, the Lenape tribe was already there. So eventually, the explorers, the Europeans, would take over and they would change the name of the land to New Amsterdam. And we are going to be learning all about what life was like during the times of New Amsterdam. So you're going to need a couple of things to get ready for today's lesson. So please gather a pencil or a pen, a piece of paper, and a green and blue crayon, or a green and blue marker would work just fine. And then we are going to buckle our seatbelts and we are going to get inside a time machine and travel back to the 15 and then 1600s. So get ready. So, hopefully you have a piece of paper and a pencil next to you. I want you to draw what you see. Press pause. So now that you drew what's in front of us, I'm wondering, what is this? Do you know the place that you just drew? Call it out. If you guessed Manhattan, you're right. But here's the thing. This place wasn't always called Manhattan. Let's suppose it were the year 1500. This place that you just drew would be called Mannahatta. Mannahatta means land of the rolling hills. What do you see here? Lots of green trees and plants and grass surrounded by blue water. Take a moment to color it in green and blue the way you see it on the screen. Press pause. So in the 1500s, Mannahatta was inhabited by a group of people known as the Lenape, Native Americans. Here's a picture of a Lenape village. As you can see, there were many people part of a clan that lived here. They hunted, fished, and gathered crops, all for survival. And they lived in homes. 2 types of special homes that they lived in. One was called the longhouse, which is what we're looking at, and they also lived in homes called wigwams. The Lenape built fires so that they could stay warm and survive. And they even had lots of different special ceremonies. Now, around the late 1500s into the early 1600s, the Europeans were really curious. They wanted to explore. And they were exploring because they were looking for a way to get from Europe to Asia. So find Europe and point to it on the map. They wanted to go to Asia so that they could trade for spices and silk, because you could find a lot of that in Asia at the time. But they wanted to go using the Northwest Passage. That means they wanted to travel northwest follow the path with your finger. And they thought that they could get to Asia going this way instead of going around Africa. But they ended up arriving in New York instead of Asia. So let's take a look at this timeline of exploration. In the 1500s, we know that the Lenape settled in Mannahatta. And then in the year 1524, there was an explorer with the name of Verrazano. He was from Italy, and he headed out on this journey northwest, and he arrived in the New York harbor. But unfortunately, he was killed by a group of Native Americans. Next up, we had an explorer whose name was Gomez. Gomez was a Portuguese explorer. He also sailed into the New York harbor, and he decided, I know, I'm going to capture a group of these Native American people that are living here on the land. I'm going to bring them back to Spain, and I'm going to turn them into slaves. That means I'm going to make them do all of my work. The king was not happy about this. He made Gomez return the Native Americans. And later on, he ended up being killed in 1528 by a group of natives as well. Then came Henry Hudson. We don't know exactly what he looked like, but a lot of people think he looked like the picture displayed here. He was born in England, and he also wanted to find a way to get to Asia. And he went on 3 separate voyages, but he had a lot of problems during these voyages. Why? Well, he was sailing through the icy Arctic Ocean. What do you think would be challenging about that? You're right. It was very cold, and a lot of his crew members died. They died of frostbite. But he was determined, and he did not want to give up. He sailed on a boat called the Half Moon on his 3rd voyage, but unfortunately, he went missing, and we don't know what happened to Henry Hudson. Hudson, that sounds familiar. Do you know of anything in New York with the name Hudson in it? Maybe you guessed the Hudson River. You're right. So he was an important man in the history of New York, so important that we named the Hudson River after him. And eventually, in the year 1624, the Dutch came to New York. They came from Holland, and they settled to make a new home, and they settled in a place called Governor's Island. Thumbs up if you've ever been to Governor's Island. Now, Peter Minuit, he bought the land, supposedly, from the Native Americans for $24. Now, they didn't have dollars at the time, but that's the story that people tell, is he bought the land for the amount of what would be $24 today. And he pushed the Lenape out. They weren't very happy about that. And a very important man, the last name Stuyvesant, he became the man in charge. He's the one in that yellow outfit. He tried to create rules and laws for the colony. Here's what the new land looked like. Here's the same exact map that we looked at the beginning. But in the 1600s, it wasn't called Manhattan. It wasn't called Mannahatta. It was called New Amsterdam. What do you notice is in this map, on this picture? Press pause. Lots of boats and houses. When the Dutch arrived, they created a lot of new types of homes to live in. They looked like a lot of the homes that they had back home in Holland. Here is your assignment for today. First, you will log into BrainPop. You can use this username and password. You will watch the video to learn more about Henry Hudson, and you will write a paragraph of at least 5 sentences sharing what you learned about Henry Hudson. This will be submitted to your classroom teacher. If you want to continue learning about Henry Hudson, feel free to take the quiz and read the related readings and explore some other fun activities on Brain